Welcome to Inside the China Room, your destination for in-depth conversations on Chinese current events, recording in China with experts across different fields. If you enjoy this episode, don't forget to subscribe. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer paid an official visit to China at the end of January, as China-UK relations continue to adjust after several difficult years. While geopolitical tensions have shaped the broader environment, the bilateral relationship has more recently shown signs of gradual stabilization. Within this evolving relationship, one Chinese institute in Britain that has drawn sustained attention is the Confucius Institutes. In recent years, they have been at the center of political debate and public scrutiny, often reflecting broader concerns about China's role and influence in the UK. Critics have long argued that they may serve as tools of Chinese influence or raise concerns about academic freedom. But how accurate are these claims? And what do Confucius Institutes actually look like from the inside? To explore these questions, I'm joined today by Professor Jinghan Zeng from City University of Hong Kong. Before moving to Hong Kong, Professor Zeng spent more than a decade in the UK, where he became one of the youngest full professors in Britain and later served for 7 years as director of the Confucius Institute at Lancaster University during a particularly turbulent period. He led the institute through the pandemic, the dissolution of the Confucius Institute headquarters, and a political campaign by the UK's then-ruling government to shut down Confucius Institutes. In August 2025, he published the first volume of his memoir, Memoirs of a Confucius Institute Director, reflecting on those experiences and responding to many of the criticisms surrounding Confucius Institutes. Before entering academia, he also worked at the United Nations in New York. Today we'll talk about how Confucius Institutes operate, how the political climate has changed around them, and what these debates tell us about China, the UK, and the academic exchange more broadly. Hi, Professor Zeng. Welcome to Inside the China Room. It's great to finally have you on my show.
Thank you, Zhang. I'm being honored to be part of this.
I think we were talking about this show like in October last year, but both of us was quite busy, so we only managed to make it happen this time in late January 2026. Well, interestingly, we seem to have caught quite a few timely moments. As we record this episode this week, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is visiting China, and there has also been a lot of discussions in the UK about the approval of a new Chinese embassy in London. So, and I also heard that the Chinese edition of the first volume of your memoir, Memoirs of Confucius Institute Director, is about to be published. So perhaps this is a good moment for us to talk about your experience. To start with, could you briefly introduce your time in the UK as a director of the Confucius Institute, what your main responsibilities were, and how you, as a Chinese scholar, became the foreign director of a Confucius Institute? Actually, after I read your book, I became aware that there are normally two directors for Confucius Institute, a foreign director and a Chinese director. And you, as a Chinese national, is served as the foreign director of the Confucius Institute. Can you also tell us what made you decide to take on this role in the first place?
Thank you. I was serving as a director from 2019 to until last year. So this is actually my first year joining Hong Kong about 7-8 months ago. So I was basically in the role for about 6 years' time. And when I was in Lancaster University, as you mentioned, I was in the Chinese context called a foreign director, or probably called a local director. So in Lancaster University, I have 3 roles basically. First one is I was a professor of China and international studies, basically doing the research on China and teach on specific courses and supervise PhD students as a professor. And the other role is director of Lancaster University Confucius Institute. Alongside those 2 roles, I was also academic director of China engagement at university. So supporting the university's China engagement and links with China in general, this including Confucius Institute, as well as other kind of links the university is having with China. For example, the China campus, different kind of projects, and recruitment with Chinese students. So it's quite rich of a package. So within the role that being a director of Confucius Institute, basically we have a team of about 30 full-time staff, and it was jointly funded between a Chinese university and a British university. And as you mentioned, I was a foreign director, means I am a representative of the foreign university, which is Lancaster University. We also have a China director who serves as my deputy director, come from South China University of Technology. So my role and responsibility mostly were providing this kind of overall kind of oversight of the institute in terms of its research on contemporary China, in terms of teaching activity, and in terms of its engagement agenda. So we are kind of one of the biggest Confucius institutes in the UK, and we have two Confucius classrooms. But it's basically teaching sites in Blackpool, based in two different primary schools, and in the north in Canberra, we also have a teaching site there. So as a director, basically, I'm responsible for the overall operation of the institute and provide oversights, and also to work with the key university stakeholders as well as the external stakeholders to ensure its smooth running and advance the language exchange and the cultural exchange between the UK and China in general. So the question about what made me to take on this role, this is slightly quite long story to begin with. I think I wrote a bit of this reflection because I think it's, to me, as you mentioned, it's quite important moment. Number one, the British Prime Minister now visited China after 8 years. You haven't really seen the past British Prime Minister visiting China for quite a long time. And number two, my Chinese version of this memoirs comes out. So indeed, when I was reflecting the experience and I was writing about this memoirs, and I go back to why did I do that? And that brings back a lot of memory because it was quite a controversial decision at the time among my own network. So I was offered a job in about 2018. I worked in University of London, Royal Holloway College, and as a senior lecturer there, teaching Chinese politics. So although when I was offered a job, a big political storm already happened in the US. So Trump has launched a trade war against China, and the US-China relation has gone down for quite 2 or 3 years. And early that year, in 2018, Trump has already started quite a few, in the US, a lot of legislations trying to ban Confucius Institute. And there was some kind of rule that if the American university, they keep their Confucius Institute, they will stop receiving the fundings from the US. And also there will be some different kind of legislation act trying to register Confucius Institute as a foreign agent. So you already got a kind of big political campaign in the US pushing their closure. And I think in the book I mentioned that I used to study University of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania for my master's, and there was a model Confucius Institute there, and unfortunately it was closed because of those waves of anti-Confucius Institute kind of political storms. So when I was offered the job, that has already happened. And as someone who studied, international politics, who studied China, I'm fully aware of that. So when I got the offer, a lot of my colleagues and people in my network think, we all know what is going to happen in the next few years, and the political storm will blow to the UK one way or another, and it's not going to be a very easy ride, as simple as that. So that was a context why it was kind of quite a controversial decisions for me, and also people I know in my network in the UK. But in the end, I still decided to take it. I think one of the key reasons is I think that as someone who studied international politics and is crucial, Confucius, I think, remain the most controversial aspects of China's engagement with the rest of the world. For anyone to understand China better, understand Chinese foreign policy, global engagement better, it's not enough to be external observers. And I would be hoping a very interesting life story that I am an insider and observing this phenomenon and activity by myself, and that I will not only be a scholar who is observing it, but also participating in it, so you can best understand that, and that will in the end produce something quite valuable and to not only knowledge, but also my own kind of life stories. So that was something quite motivated me to join at the time. But I appreciate the different kind of opinion and also advice I was given by my close friends and also colleagues who really care about me, and I was grateful to that.
Yeah,
And just to mention one more thing, so for the full story, that was a very short version of it. For the full story, maybe I can refer the listeners to the preface of the book, which detailed a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I read your book, and also I remember that you mentioned about like you want to. I mean, in Chinese we can call it 躬身入局. So you don't want to just be an observer. You want to experience yourself. I think that's a really a challenge task at that moment because you just mentioned about the context when you were about to decide to take that role. I don't know. Well, looking back now, do you think you have achieved this goal? I mean, did you get enough experience that which can help your study or research or reflection on international politics? Because that's your I mean, think your main research focus, right?
Yeah. I think if you think about the research wise, I think it's more than I expected. I think if you go back, I know it's going to be bumpy road, but I didn't expect it's going to be that bumpy, and for lots of reasons, something we will cover later. And also in the history of Confucius Institute in Lancaster University, for example, founded in 2011. And the 6 years time, when I was a director, I was the most bumpy road because of one challenge after another, another. No one really expect that. So in terms of like a lifetime experience, I think yeah, definitely it's interesting and quite a lot of things to detail, quite a lot of things to share. Regarding the research as well, I think it was also a very unique period. I think as you can read from the book, the first year when I took the role, we immediately were headed by the pandemic that put things up and down, and to have to stop all the kind of in-person teaching and all of kind of problem come with it, a mental health issue, well-being issue, research issue, and then along the way, the Confucius Institute, the headquarters, had that dissolved. That is the biggest organizational change ever happened to Confucius Institute. And Hanban was the most powerful cultural and language organization. I mean, by then, at its peak time, just can't imagine its influence in higher education. So, like in my first year, like being a director, second year, like something didn't really give me much time, and that dissolved. So when we start to finally, find our feet and recovering from the pandemic and the shock and everything, and then another, political wave against Confucius Institute. So it's become a key debate of the leadership campaign in the Westminster against something big I expect. So it's just one after another. It kept me very busy, and so I think yes, it helped me a lot to really understand about Confucius Institute and understand how China has been interacting with the external world and the kind of internal decision making and institutional logic. And I think that's all kind of those external challenge provide just valuable kind of opportunity for me really to not only observe but also participate in shaping it.
So, in your view, what has been the biggest misunderstanding about Confucius Institutes in British society? Was there a particular moment when you felt this misunderstanding most strongly, and how did you personally deal with it?
Well, I think first of all, the UK society, their view on Confucius is quite divided. You have, and I think many of that comes from their different kind of understanding about China. You got some people have a very like anti-Chinese, anti-China view, and they don't really like China. They don't really like Chinese government, and that has been coming across a lot of other things. And you also got other people who do not have a strong view on it, and then has been reflecting on Confucius Institute. And I think regarding this one, I mean, most of people they view Confucius Institute as an alien, Chinese organization, and some people will even say, you come here with an evil Chinese state objective agenda to do something that is bad for the Great Britain. And a lot of China focus would be giving that narrative about Confucius Institute, and they have been accusing Confucius Institute for a lot of things. For example, promoting propaganda, even being spying organization or suppress Chinese students, which I have tried to address in the book. So you got all kind of media narrative and also there, and those narrative frequently appears in political speech as well, especially the hawkish conservative MPs. They were having that kind of view. So it's always there. And to others, basically, they think that Confucius Institute and also people work with it are part of the Chinese government. And you have to be there, serve the government line and to represent the government. So in my own experience, I think in a book I also talk about when I was in Royal Holloway, University of London. So I frequently appears in major international media like BBC. So they would be inviting me to comment on things relevant to China's politics. And when they were looking for experts who understand China and also politics, they would invite me. But when I joined Lancaster University, they will still invite me, but they only invite me when they are looking for what they call a China apologist. So basically, it's all someone they believe will be there to defend China 100% and not being neutral and play the government line. Because now I'm a Confucius student, even if I'm still the same person. So I think that was a part that for me, the first and second year, take some time to psychologically adapt into this kind of role that the society expect me to play, even if I think I'm still the person and I'm being independent academic. And also there was, again, go back to the first question, there was misunderstanding that, because I was a foreign director, so I wasn't a China director. I wasn't sent by China to be the Confucius director. I was hired by a UK university representing the UK alongside being a UK university professor, and which my view is independent of the Chinese government, and we don't really have this kind of formal affiliation. So I think those were quite technical details, but I don't think the general society would really understand and appreciate those nuances there. So for me, and I think it takes time for you to be there to get used to that kind of social expectation of what they expect you to be, and in a way that still continue to be yourself, but understanding the external expectation is different and the environment is different.
You mentioned about promoting propaganda. I know that that's many critics say about the Confucius Institute. Sometimes, as you just mentioned, maybe it's a little bit hard for people to distinguish cultural engagement and propaganda. What is your view about the differences between these two things?
Well, I think we need to really understand when we think about Confucius Institute, right? I think there was a lot of double standards, geopolitical double standards of it, right? Uh, a lot of politicians they are anti-Confucius Institute, but they are very much proud of British Council, right? If you look at the UK government, I mean, they are very proud that UK is being a top soft power in the world, and very proud how English is being spoken across the world, how British influence is there, and something they're very proud of to be British. And I mean, the UK is no longer the great empire anymore, right? No longer have the hard power it used to have. But soft power is something it has left because of its culture, because of its heritage. We something it should be proud of. But I think the thing here is if it is entirely legitimate for British Council to conduct cultural engagement, cultural diplomacy, then what is wrong with Confucius Institute? So I think there was a lot of kind of double standard there, number one. Number two is cultural engagement and cultural practice is common across the world. Not only China do that, you also got Spanish language, German language, Japanese language. So I think in many ways, promoting language itself is not something is wrong. And also cultural engagement and language engagement is something we should encourage. And I think there was a lot of misunderstanding about what Confucius really has been doing, accusing them being, propaganda and blah, blah, blah. But I think that has been, misrepresenting the legitimate cultural engagement, legitimate cultural diplomacy, which is common practice across the world, and which something that Western society has been doing and also is doing very well at, right? Like promoting British soft power is something the British society is very good at. And China is not really in the same level field competing with the UK. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about that.
In the book, you often compare Confucius Institutes with the British Council, which also operates cultural and language programs around the world. From your perspective, what are the main similarities and differences between the two institutes, and how they are perceived by host countries?
Well, I think they are quite similar in many ways. I think if you look at the overall goal of it, the British Council is there to promote British influence across the world, to promote British language, British culture, and understanding about the British society. And I think that's crucial. I think we need to understand that, and a lot of people would like it. I mean, a lot of people in China would like the Shakespeare, like British music, British film, and a lot of most of Chinese would be learning English in their education. It's mandatory. So in many ways, I think it helps for people to understand better about the UK cultural music and everything. So it's Confucius Institute. The Confucius Institute is developed in the context of China's rise. In the context that China become the second largest world economy, there are lots of economic opportunities. And across the world in Asia, Africa, Middle East, there is a lot of people want to understand China more because there is an economic needs to do that. And along the way, I think people need to understand about Chinese culture, need to understand about Chinese society. And so Confucius Institute are there to help people's understanding and promote this kind of language and cultural exchange between China and rest of the world. So in terms of the mission and goals, they are very similar. And in terms of funding and governance, and funding wise, if you go back to the history of British Council, it was closely linked with Foreign Office. It's still being sponsored by the British government. So it has that kind of state affiliation and state funding mentioned in there. In terms of governance, I think this is really a big difference there because the British Council kind of branches that operate, for example, in China independently, but the Confucius Institute, they operate slightly different because they work with a local partner to build a joint partnership and then promoting Chinese language and cultural understanding. That make a difference from the way British Council is being governed. But in terms of funding, in terms of its overall mission and other things, I would say they are very similar.
In 2019, your institute was awarded the title of Confucius Institute of the Year by the Confucius Institute headquarters, the only recipient in the UK that year, and one of the just 25 selected worldwide. You attended the annual conference in Changsha to receive the reward on behalf of your institute. Could you tell us a bit more about that experience? What was the criteria for this award? And more broadly, did anyone ever question whether such awards were meant to recognize the educational work, or whether they could be seen as a rewarding political, public diplomacy, or propaganda efforts?
It was quite interesting and pleasant experience for me. I think when I go to Changsha, it was my first time to be Changsha, and it was quite amazing kind of conference with the vice chancellors, president of the university all across over the world, and the Confucius Institute Director all in one conference in Changsha. It was quite a grand opening, and opened by the Chinese Vice Premier Sun Chunnan, and also you got Educational Minister there as well, and quite a lot of high-level people. So it was very grand and amazing kind of conference experience. I think we are very fortunate to receive this award, and it is actually the first time that my institute was receiving this kind of formal recognition externally in these awards. So the criteria for applying this award was really very much set by the Confucius Institute headquarters. They have a set of like sophisticated metrics regarding, for example, normal metrics about the number of students learning in your institute, the number of people participating in your events, and as long as whether you have made any distinct kind of contribution or influence you have. So it was quite a specific kind of mechanism of what selection, which I think I do not fully understand how it works, but they have a kind their own X group to make it and do it. But it's quite rigorous. Have every question about it? I think it's mostly for the people who are skeptical of it. They wouldn't be skeptical that why this Confucius Institute win the awards. They will be skeptical of Confucius Institute overall. They'll think why you are here, why you are doing that. But for the people who are within the community, and obviously there's a competition, and as you mentioned, there are 29, 30 Confucius Institute in the UK, and we are the only one who received this award in that specific year. So there was a competition there, and I think we are just being very fortunate that we are selected in that year, and we are also very grateful.
And looking back, what do you think was the most challenging part of being a Confucius Institute Director in the UK during that period?
Well, I think it's one challenge after another. I think all the three challenges are quite challenging situation for me. Number one is the pandemic time, and it just happened, the second year of my second year of directorship started, and I wasn't really ready for a complete reset of our operation by then. And then the dissolution of Confucius Institute got headquarters come as well, and before I feel that I was more ready for that kind of challenge. And then a few years later, the campaign. So I would say it's all totally unexpected experience for me, and I wouldn't really be expecting one will be happening after another, and didn't really give me time to brace. I think there was a lot of kind of stress that I just have to handle by myself, and to make sure that I am in one piece and are being a good kind of confident and also ready kind of stage to handle those challenge, so that I will be able to go out and to mobilize my team and to comfort my team that we will go through this, right? If, for example, in the pandemic, there was a lot of concern about how the UK government has been dealing with the pandemic, whether it was sufficient or not, and what should we do? A lot of mental health issue, mental well-being issue, racism issue towards Chinese community. So I also do not know what might be happening the next day. So often that I need to make sure that I am in one piece, and being able to handle my own work properly before that I'm able to come out and comfort my colleagues and be sure that they are all okay and look after them, and that operate our institute and continue our activity online and doing lots of things. So it's quite a lot when I now reflect back. And I think one thing that haven't really been mentioned in this specific book was the internal challenge. I think it documented about 3 external challenges. There are considerable internal challenges as well. So that has been interacting with the external challenge, because when you have the pandemic, when you have the dissolution of Confucius Institute headquarters, when you have a big creative campaign trying to close Confucius Institute, the 6 years time I was going through was a clear downfall of UK-China relations. And in that regard, people's perception about Confucius Institute changed significantly, and not only in the British society, but also within the university. So I can see that the university leadership's view and the colleagues' view on Confucius Institute and what we are doing are very different. And there are quite a lot of domestic challenges as well. Those will be something that I would have to experience day by day and firsthand. That sometimes bring more challenge than those external challenges.
And I remember that you mentioned you have 4 roles during that period: a Chinese national, UK-based director, a manager, and a political scholar. Have you ever found that any of the roles, contradict with each other when you want to achieve something or overcome some challenges? And is there any criteria in your mind, when you have to reconcile those 4 roles when you were solve the internal or external challenges?
Well, I think there are lots of that. Just too many that probably will take some time for me to talk a little bit. So let's say my role as a professor, right? Being academic, what we need to do is to maintain academic integrity. You need to be independent and to be critical of the issue and be frank about the issue and what is going on. So that's one thing. But being a director of Confucius Institute what I need to do as a managerial role is I need to protect the best interest of the institute, and sometimes those two roles can conflict with each other if let's say I'm coming out and research on the topic of Confucius Institute while I was serving the role, right? So being a professor, you need to be as frank as possible and about what is going on. But meanwhile, being a director, you cannot do that. You need to protect the best interest of the institute, and not everything you want to spoken openly, directly. And I think that was a challenge. So what I choose to do is to avoid that. While I continue to study about China and writing a lot of things, in my 6 years time being a director, I stopped myself and prevent myself from engaging in a debate on Confucius Institute in research, because I think it's very difficult to make the right balance, and that's very important. There are also other examples as well. For example, balancing my role as a Confucius director and also being a scholar. So being my research study about international politics and role of China. So we look at the macro level kind of things, U.S.-China competition and the rise of China, things like very grand things. So that helps me to understand about the bigger political climate we're constantly in. What is a debate in London about China and blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I'll be engaging. Meanwhile, my role as a director of Confucius Institute, which a lot of it is about managing the institute, managing the day-to-day experience, and that focus on the groundwork and understanding too much about the weather. And if we always look to the sky and to say what might be going on to the weather, it might not be helpful for you to look after what has been going on the ground daily, because that's sometimes most of the days they are irrelevant to that. So how are going to really balance those two are something interesting, and for me now when we reflect back. And also there are some other kind of things as well. I mean, for example, on the issue of the dissolution of a Confucius Institute headquarters, I think I mentioned a bit in this book, and I will unpack more in my future works. As a professor and academic, I think this is a good move, because when you now having a new foundation, which is a non-government organization, and cutting the tie of Confucius with the government, so you make Confucius more like the British Council and operate more decentralized. So getting rid of its its links with the government is a good move. But as a director and as the internal stakeholders, I don't think that really work. I myself has been questioning about its efficiency, its effectiveness in many ways, and it failed to stop about a lot of critiques in the West, like Confucius is having those kind of links with government or being extension of Chinese government. Really didn't stop that kind of critics. So from that perspective, is this a really successful kind of reform? So on all those kind of issues, you can say the split a kind of identity, and that has been leading to different kind of discussions. So some of the which have been documented in the book that for the readers, they can probably go to the book and read more.
Yeah, I mean, when I read the book, I feel like you were, describe the situations in a straightforward, frank way. But I believe that even though you have, accomplished lots of goals and solved lots of challenges, there might be also some other things that you didn't really predict which is going to happen, like challenge from every aspect. So if you had chance to go through this experience as a director of a Confucius Institute again, is there anything you think you could have been handled better? And what advice would you give to future directors or to scholars who may consider taking a similar roles in the UK or elsewhere in the world?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's like imagining now we have a time machine that go back to where everything started, what is going to happen. Um, I think when I reflect back, um, I would say that a lot of things are out of my hands. I'll probably say all the major things happening are out of our hands, right? If I have a crystal ball, I would know that there will be a pandemic coming. Can I do anything to stop it? No. If I know that the dissolution of Confucius Institute headquarters is going to happen, can I do something about it? No. If we know there is going to be a political campaign to ban Confucius, can we do anything about it? No. So I think in the book, I've been arguing that what we can do as a director of a Confucius Institute, we can ensure that our institute are properly managed. We can ensure that we align what we want to do with the expectation of the British university, align with the British value, align with the Chinese university and also China stakeholder. We can do that. We can manage that properly. But there is always external expectation or external critique that has been ignoring your actual practice. No matter how well managed you are, no matter how much you are disconnected with those kind of allegations, those things will still be there. I think, for example, there is a lot of accusation about Confucius, of undermine academic freedom, promoting, or even being a spying agency, right? As a director, we can ensure that that is something never would be happening, right? It's basically a lot of them are based on false information anyway. So we can manage our institution properly and to make sure it's as transparent as we can. That's something we can do. So if we go, and something we have already done. So if now when I go back to 6 years ago, I can't do better. But what we cannot do is, regardlessly who you are, how much now you have done, how brilliant you are, those kind of external political climate is something you cannot change. And that perception you cannot change. The gap between perception and reality is something I cannot change. So should I have go back to the opportunity? What can be handled better? I think on all the major ground things, we have been doing what we can. And what I can, I think in many ways. And should I have a crystal ball? Maybe what I can do better is I can be less stressful. And that probably will be more healthier for me, for my own well-being and also for my family's well-being. Because when I go back to maybe what has been happening, there was a lot of stress when the pandemic happened. I don't know really what's going on, and my colleagues are very anxious, anxiety, and lots of issues, and I don't really know where is the night of the tunnel. How long we are going to go through this? What we should do next? And when the dissolution of Confucius Institute headquarters happened, we don't really know whether that would be the end of Confucius. There's a lot of anxiety there. You have to make a lot of decisions in the darkness and trying to comfort your colleagues while yourself is not so sure about it. So should I have this crystal ball? I think I would be more calmly and go through it with less stress and more better well-being, so that and also that would be very good for my family as well, because a lot of things comes when those kind of external challenges happen. And what has been going on in my head is always about the stress and what can we do better, what should we be doing. So you have a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress there, and unfortunately sometimes just can't cut it before you go back home. And I have brought some of those back to my family, which now I regret a bit. So if we go back, I think that's probably something I can do better. Is you are more psychologically prepared and you feel less stressful. You know that things eventually will sort it by themselves. So what would be my advice to the future directors? I would say, calm down and continue. So everything will be okay eventually, and the controversy about Confucius will continue, but there will always be a way out. So do not get too stressed and calm down and continue. Yeah, and carry on.
Yeah, I really like you include a lot of small stories in your book, which including what you just mentioned, like during the pandemic, you have to take care of the colleagues, some students. There are lots of issues. I think all those small stories are really fascinating in the book, and I recommend everybody read it. And let's take the time machine back to now. Now we know that the British Prime Minister is visiting China, and as someone who has been deeply involved in China-UK cooperation projects, both as a scholar and a manager, and your major is include like the international politics. So how do you view the current state of China-UK relations? And what do you think is the broader significance of Prime Minister Starmer's visit to China this week?
I think ever since 2024, July 2024, when the Labour took in charge, and they started to take kind of view that is going to reset UK-China relation. If you go back to 2015, there was a big slogan of this kind of UK-China gold era, but that immediately collapsed because of the Brexit, because of the resign of David Cameron and George Osborne. So we have been then seeing a kind of free fall of the UK-China relations and going down, down, down to the bottom. And I think 2014 really represents at the bottom, the worst period of UK-China relation come to an end when Labour took in charge in July 2024. And then we see gradually, this coming back of the normalized relation between UK and China, and the hawkish view, they start to analyze that. I mean, a lot of hawkish sentiment comes out, and then I think the UK government and also the British society start to, rethink about China in a more objective way. So I think this now is really a recovery of what has been going through in the past few years. I wouldn't say that we are seeing another golden era again, but I do think that we are now seeing quite a recovery of this kind of normalization of UK-China relations, and that is moving towards a better stage. And you can see there is a lot of promise there. And also what is interesting is that you see last year also there was a lot of critics over Labour on this kind of term to objectively understanding China. And I think what is good is that Labour Party and the British Prime Minister managed to fend off those critics. They approved the Chinese embassy in London, which has been there ongoing for quite a lot of time for debate. And they managed to, start to fend off those kind of critics and start to view China as an economic opportunity and want to engage with China, which they should be doing long ago. So I think what is the significance of that, it is basically a big statement saying that, in the past 80 years or so, there's no Prime Minister visit to China. And now the Prime Minister is here again, and we are going to see this kind of normalization of UK-China relation, that the UK is readjusting its own identity and understanding of China in the context of China's rise, recognizing China's importance to the UK, and start to explore more about this engagement.
And before we wrap up, is there anything we haven't talked about today that you would like readers to know about your book? And I'm also curious, what do you expect the second volume to be published?
Well, I think I would want to leave all the unanswered things to the book, and that's always what authors would be doing. Would be encourage the listeners to buy the book and read it yourself, and you can see the full story. And I hope this podcast helps them to provide a bit kind of context and background information before they read the book. So in terms of the second volume, I have already finished. So that's a good news, and fingers crossed. And I will send it to the press soon. So I think if we are very lucky, we might get it by the end of this year. Or if not, then I think 2027 will definitely have the second volume available. The second volume will mostly talk about how the Confucius Institute is not about how China goes out. It's a story of how China interacts with the rest of the world. So I will be focusing on how the importance of national level factor in the UK, regional level factor in the UK, universal level factor in the UK has been affecting Confucius Institutes. So the key kind of narrative and argument is that the Confucius Institutes are not decided by Chinese stakeholders. It's joint funding between Chinese and local stakeholder, and local stakeholder play a more permanent role in shaping its actual operation. And this is something that often being ignored by the conventional wisdom of Confucius Institute. And I think that is something definitely for people who want to understand about China global presence needs to read and understand more.
Looking forward to that. Thank you so much for coming to my show. I mean, I read and learned a lot from your books, and really recommend to everybody who is interested in learning about Chinese culture or the reality of a institute, a culture institute in UK, and how a director solve all the internal and external challenges and led a team to really accomplish something in 6 or 7 years. So thank you very much, Professor Zeng.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Inside the China Room. I really appreciate you staying with us till the end. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following the show and leaving a quick rating or comment wherever you are listening. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners. I always love hearing from you as well, so feel free to email me at jjing.sisu@hotmail.com with any thoughts, questions, or even ideas for future episodes. And if you found today's conversation helpful, please share the podcast with a friend who might enjoy it too. Thanks again for joining me. See you next time and take care.